Almost a week after the Eric Robinson extension, the Carolina Hurricanes make more news as they extend Juha Jääskä for 2 more seasons. What does it mean for both sides and why I think it makes sense to bring him back for another run? Also, we're going to do our last 25 draft preview. Will the Hurricanes stay at 29 or will they trade away? If they do keep it, I think there's one person in particular they should draft at 29th overall.
You're Locked On Hurricanes, your daily podcast on the Carolina Hurricanes. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to a Friday edition of Locked On Hurricanes, your team every day, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Thank you to the Everyday for making this your first listen of the day. 5 days a week, Monday through Friday, talking everything about your Carolina Hurricanes. I'm your host, Zach Martin. I'm the credentialed Carolina Hurricanes beat writer over at the Hawkers, also the co-host of the Searchcast, which is a weekly Carolina Hurricanes podcast, along with all my duties here at Locked On Hurricanes. On the Friday edition of the show, we're going to be talking about the Juha Jääskä extension and why I think it's a win-win deal for both sides. Also, we're going to do our final 2025 draft preview. I know we've talked about the draft a lot on the show for the last couple weeks, but it is finally here as Friday is day one of the draft. And will the Hurricanes stay at 29 or will they trade it away for more picks in the draft or maybe a player for now? And if they do stay, why I think that there's one person in particular they definitely need to talk, to draft, and I've talked about them before. But before we jump into all of that, today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Now, we all know that the Eric Robinson extension happened last week on Friday, going into Saturday, and the fact that the Hurricanes did extend Robinson for 4 years. Now on Thursday afternoon, Thursday morning, they announced the extension of Juha Jääskä, which I think is a phenomenal deal when you look at it. So for Jääskä, it is a 2-year contract extension worth it being $775,000, which is the AAV, or it comes out to $1.55 million total over the couple years. Now, what makes this contract interesting is the fact that this upcoming season for 25-26, he makes $775,000 if he plays in the NHL, or he makes $250,000 if he plays in the American Hockey League with the Chicago Wolves next year. But he is guaranteed at least $425,000. So even if he plays in the American, he's still guaranteed almost double of what his AHL part of the contract is on his 2-way deal. Now, in year 2, for the 26-27 season, he will be paid $775,000 on a 1-way deal. Now, either way, he's going to make that much money. Regardless if he's in the American or if he's in the NHL, that's just is what it is. That is his contract. And I'm thinking for the Hurricanes, it's probably going to be a possibility that he might be their 13th forward either this upcoming season or maybe in the season after. So either way, you're looking at a potential deal where Jääskä might be with the Hurricanes a lot longer than just the 18 games that he played in this previous season of 24-25. But Eric Tulsky did talk about, he gave a quote, talking about Jääskä. He said, Juha had a strong season making the transition to hockey in North America and proved he could be an effective player on the NHL level, which for me, I think he really did, because he made his debut on January 2nd against Florida, did a great job overall, got 4 assists and 4 points total in his regular, 18 regular season games with the Hurricanes. And that's even after the fact that he, got 12 goals and 33 points with, the Chicago Wolves. So that's not bad overall when you look at how Juha Jääskä played. And the fact that you even look at his Finland, stats when he played the HIFK, how about 51 goals and 142 points in 310 games in the Liga? So he has shown that he can be a really effective hockey player wherever he plays at. And the fact that you talk about 9 seasons in Finland, and then you come over to North America for your debut and have a pretty solid, career, first season with the Chicago Wolves in the American Hockey League, and then you come over to also play in Raleigh for 18 games and you put up 4 assists. And the fact, too, is he came right into the lineup and was effective right from the jump. And I think that's what the Hurricanes really like about him, is the fact that he's a hard-nosed player. In 18 games, he had 3 block shots and 20 hits. That's pretty effective right from the rip to be a guy who, and that's the one thing that the Hurricanes love about this new, way of, you're playing the same system in Chicago as you do in Carolina, so it's almost a seamless transition for those guys where they're not having to learn 2 different systems. It's the same system in both areas. Then that's why you see guys who can make that jump up and effectively slide right in with no issues. We saw with Ryan Suzuki, we saw with Justin Robidoux, we saw with Juha Jääskä, Scott Morrow, and all that. You saw a lot of these guys move up from Chicago on their call-ups and fit seamlessly into the lineup, and that's what you saw from Jääskä. Played a lot of minutes on the 4th line, but you come out there and you get 4 assists in 18 games. That's not bad at all. And like I said, you get 20 hits in your first 18 games. That's well over a hit per game, which is pretty solid overall, especially for a guy who's never played North American hockey until this past season. And the fact that he's a hard-nosed player, great two-way, he fits the system perfectly. So it makes sense why the Hurricanes, extended for 2 years, because now you got a solidified depth player who could play in Chicago, come up to Carolina in case there's an injury or anything like that. And who knows, if Jääskä plays really well in training camp, here in September, who's to say that he's not possibly a 13th forward on the Hurricanes, and there's your extra guy, which wouldn't be a bad get to have if they think that he's that good, that it's like, hey, we want you here in Carolina, we want you to be our 13th forward. There's a possibility that even then, Jääskä could be with the Hurricanes as an extra player, which wouldn't be bad at all. Yeah, you probably not get as many minutes as you would in Chicago, because Chicago would love to have him again. But even then, for Carolina, if they think that, hey, you fit the system well, we can really use you on nights maybe where guys need a rest, or there's an injury, we can slot you into the lineup, and we're not going to be worried about it. So there is some possibilities there. Like I said, even in his second year of his contract, it's a one-way deal. So that could, show that the Hurricanes really think that he could take that next step to being a, 13th forward if they really think so, and just be a guy that they can rely on. But so for them, like I said, for Carolina, it's a win for them because now they have a depth player that they really like. They know that fits the system well, and he did really good in his North American debut last season. And even if they play him in Chicago, the Wolves are going to love having him down there because he was effective for them last year when they made the Calder Cup playoffs. For Jääskä, well, you got rewarded for a great North American debut last year. Now you're going to be staying with the Hurricanes for another 2 seasons. And yeah, while the money isn't over $1 million and stuff like that, you're still going to make $1.55 million over the next 2 seasons, depending on how everything works out, but you're still going to get paid. Like, you're already guaranteed at least $425,000 in your first year. And if you play in the NHL, you make $775,000, but then year 2, you're making $775,000 as well. So you're still making a pretty decent amount of money compared to what you got in 1 year. And you also have the stability of staying in Raleigh, or, at least staying with the organization, even if you're playing in Chicago for 2 seasons. So overall, I think this is a great win-win deal for both sides. Like I said, you get a depth player and you get stability for Jääskä after playing, 1 season in North America, and the fact that the team loved what you did. So I think it's a great move. And the thing, too, is it doesn't really change the Hurricanes' cap space. Even after the Robinson deal, where they're still over $26 million, they're still at $26 million because with Jääskä's deal, they can just put his contract right in the American Hockey League, and it doesn't really affect your cap space. So overall, it's nothing lost and nothing gained because, just by the fact that you're not losing any cap space and you're not losing a player that you really like. So yeah, you signed him, but now his contract's technically with the Chicago Wolves, and you still have your $26 million, and you're not, losing out on the $775,000, which I don't think the Hurricanes would care about. But now you still have the flexibility to still go make your moves, and now you got Jääskä signed up for a couple seasons, and you can just, have his contract off your cap. So great move overall for the Hurricanes. Really excited to see what Jääskä can do with 2 more seasons in North America, whether being in Chicago or in Carolina. Now, with all that being said, it is time to talk about the NHL Draft one last time, as day 1 of the draft is on Friday. So stick around and we'll do our final 2025 draft preview here on a Friday edition of Locked On Hurricanes. Have you ever decided at the last minute to head into a ball game with friends or family? Maybe it's game day and you suddenly realize you want to be in the stands. That's exactly where Game Time comes in. It's the easiest way to grab last-minute tickets without the stress. With the money you save on tickets, you can splurge on food, drinks, merch, or even invite a bigger group to come with you. Game Time makes it possible. Game Time makes buying tickets fast and simple. Prices on the app actually drop the closer you get to first pitch, and they've got incredible last-minute deals, clear seat views, and the lowest price guarantee that makes worry out of buying. And the great thing, too, is Game Time has last-minute tickets and zone deals for big savings, like 10% off exclusive zone deals for FIFA World Cup matchups, and their seat views right in the app before you buy, so you know exactly where you will be. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONAHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off. Download the Game Time app today. Last minute tickets, lowest prices guaranteed. Welcome back to segment 2 of Locked On Hurricanes, your team every day. So we talked about the Juha Jääskä extension. Now we are going to talk about the 2025 draft. This is the last preview. Last time we're going to be talking about it because as of next week, we'll definitely be looking at free agency, with free agency being on Tuesday. But for this one, it's our last preview for the draft. Round 1 begins on Friday night at 7 p.m. And, of course, you can be able to watch it on ESPN and ESPN+. And then rounds 2 through 7 will take place on Saturday, June 20th, starting at noon Eastern. And that will be featured on NHL Network and ESPN+. So that's where you can kind of watch the draft over the next couple of days, starting on Friday night and then starting off on Saturday around noon. So where do the Carolina Hurricanes, what are their picks for the upcoming this draft? Well, night 1, they do have a pick at 20th overall, round 1, and we all know about that. Will the Hurricanes stay? Will they trade away? Who knows? And then you've got the 87th overall, thanks from Tampa Bay in round 3. Round 4, 125th overall. Then it's round 6, where they have 183 from Tampa, and then their own 189th overall pick. And then in round 7, they have 221st overall. Now, here comes the big question in the fact that what happens here for the Carolina Hurricanes? Well, we all know that overall, last year they did trade their pick away to the Chicago Blackhawks, and they got Dominic Bigdicka with their 34th overall pick in the last draft. They also had 57 as well. And then if you go back 2 seasons ago, 2 drafts ago, they had the 30th overall, and they selected Bradley Nadeau out of Penticton, which I think is still a great pick. He went to Maine, had a great season. Plays for Chicago Wolves last year, and has 32 goals in his first pro season. And there's a possibility of does he come up and play for the Hurricanes next year, or do you give him a second year? But at least he's probably the best pure goal scorer the Hurricanes have in their system. So that's a great pickup there. For the Hurricanes, it's do they stick with their picks that they have now, because they traded their second rounder in that trade for Mikko Rantanen back in January, so they don't have a second, they don't have a fifth, and the Hurricanes are known for as a team that if they don't feel like they want to draft late in the first round, they will trade their draft pick away, maybe get some more draft assets back. Now, could they move it for a player that's now? Maybe, who really knows? But I think with the fact that if they feel like, well, if we can still get our guy in early in the second round, they could potentially trade it. It's just who could be their trade partners. Like I said, there's the Chicago Blackhawks got a couple picks in the second round. They also got the Seattle Kraken, the Boston Bruins. There's a bunch of teams in round 2 that they go and just trade their 29th overall and pick up a couple draft picks in round 2. So that'll be interesting to see how they do things. Or they could stick at 29 and be like, hey, you know what? We already have a bunch of guys in the system. We don't really need to keep overloading with all these prospects. Plus, we have a lot of other guys that we could sign and bring over to North America. there is that possibility as well. So I think that there's a lot of avenues the Hurricanes could go down here. But if you look at the draft, it's decentralized for the first time. So it'd be interesting to see how many trades we're going to be having. How fast is the trade going to happen? Because now it's not you're waiting for every team to bring all their guys up. Now it's just it's going to be like the NFL and the NBA, where it's just a rapid fire. A lot of picks are going through and stuff like that. Of course, we'll see because they do a lot of the analysis stuff on day one. So could we see a draft that might still take 3 hours? Who really knows? But day two goes really, really quick in terms of that, because then picks are just flying left and right because they're having to go through 6 other rounds of the draft. But like I said, for Carolina, they're in an interesting spot because, like I said, they don't have a 5th and they don't have a 2nd and they have a late 1st. It puts them in an interesting spot, like I said, to where do you stick at 29 or do you move on from it and go get some draft assets? And do you think, hey, if we can go get this guy, if we think that he can last to the early second round, we don't even have to take him here at 29. We can trade it away and get some additional draft picks, which, like I said, they've done before. So I wouldn't be surprised if we wait until the Hurricanes are up on for their pick, and like last year, they just traded away, and then it's like, okay, now it's like night one's officially done for the Hurricanes. Now you got to wait for day 2, and that's when they start making all their picks and stuff like that. So it'll definitely be interesting. But overall, I mean, like I said, you look at where the Hurricanes sit. Like I said, they got a late first rounder at 29. You don't have a pick until 87, and that came from the Jake Gensel trade, and then you have to wait almost another 40 picks until you get round 4, and then you have to wait on almost another 60 picks until you hit round 6, and then you have 2 within 6 of each other, and then you got to wait until 221st overall. So you have 4 picks there, Carolina's, actually theirs out of the 6 total, and and the fact too is their 3rd round pick that they had, originally was for Evgeny Kuznetsov in that trade with the Washington Capitals. And of course they, like I said, they got that 3rd pick back from the Jake Gensel trade. So it's just, it'll be something to keep an eye on for the Hurricanes overall of like, what's going to happen for them. Who really knows? Like I said, it's tough to know what the Hurricanes are going to do here because it's one of those things where you just never know anymore, because they can keep the picks and actually use them, or they can just turn them away. But then it's just, is it more draft picks? Is it a player that's ready for now? And I know there's a lot of rumors going around of, could they be in for possibly a Rasmus Anderson? So I keep hearing about, Erik Karlsson, which for me just doesn't make any sense. I mean, Erik Karlsson is a great player, but he's all offense. And he hasn't really been playing that great with the Pittsburgh Penguins. I know the Penguins have been struggling, but you would hope if there is a trade there that it's some retained from Pittsburgh, because even then I don't think you want that type of contract sitting on your books. And it's like, do you want to get another former Shark? And nothing against the Sharks, but do you want another former Shark on the Hurricanes when there's other guys you could potentially go get if you do make a trade here? So who really knows? So could I see the Hurricanes be making a splash in this draft in terms of a trade? I don't really think so, because the Hurricanes are definitely a team that mostly look at making huge trades around the re-sign free agency phase more than anything else. They're not a team that makes a huge splashy move at the draft. So that'd be interesting. But like I said, you got the 1st, you got the 3rd, you got the 4th, 2 6s and a 7. Could you be making a lot of big moves here? Maybe, depending on who you feel like is going to be available, but it just comes down to that 1st round pick. And that's where I think that's going to be the biggest question mark of this draft is, do the Hurricanes stick at 29 or do they move on from it? And if they do, who's going to be that guy that they might go after? And I think there's one player in particular I would love to have, but there's also a lot of other options as well. So stick around and we'll talk about why the Hurricanes should possibly stay at 29 if they do stay there, or will they trade it away? And if they do, who I think they should be drafting. So stick around. We'll talk about it here in a second on a Friday edition of Locked On Hurricanes. Ever wish managing your money felt easier? Well, with Monarch Money, it can. Whether you're growing your savings or planning a big purchase, Monarch puts you in the driver's seat. It's like having your personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control of your finances. Monarch Money is more than just a budgeting app. It's a complete financial command center. You can track all your accounts, investments, and spending in one place. So in addition to managing your money, you're also building wealth. And it's never been easier to share your finances with someone. How's Monarch Money helped you stay on the same page? Well, it's just an easier way to balance your finances together and know where everything stands in one place for you and your significant other. So take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONHL at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONHL for half off your first year. Welcome back to segment 3 of Locked On Hurricanes, your team every day. So we kind of previewed the draft a little bit, where the Hurricanes, pick going into the draft, how they acquired some of these picks, and, how is it all going to play out for the Hurricanes? And like I said in segment 2, the big question is, what are they going to do at 29? Are they going to keep the pick and actually get someone, or are they going to trade away for possible draft assets, or do they move it for a guy that's ready now? For an AHL player that they can go and just get and move on with. And I can see a possibility where the Hurricanes do move their 20th overall pick, and maybe it goes to Calgary, because Calgary's already got 2 picks in the first round, but who's to say they can't have a third? Because I talked about it during the Rasmus Anderson episode on Thursday, to where they can give up their 2025 first or their 26 first, and a high-end prospect. Would it be what could be Blake, or could it be Morrow, or could it be, Charles Alexis Legault, or whoever, could the 2025 first be involved? And then the Hurricanes don't draft until round 3, which for them would be whatever at that point, because they're, overall, they're pretty much stocked on the defense and the wingers. They just really have to go get centers, but you can get a lot of those guys later on in the draft. Or there's a possibility they could just trade the 29th overall pick, and like I said, go get a couple picks in round 2. Whether it be from Chicago again, or it could be Boston or Seattle, or whoever be it, there's those possibilities that the Hurricanes could just trade the 29th overall and get more draft picks. And now you go from having, 6 to now having 7, and you got 2 in the second round now instead of none in the second round. So at least you're kind of getting more moves there. But let's say the Hurricanes do stay at 29. Maybe they feel like, okay, well, we don't really need to get more draft picks, and we don't think this guy might last until whatever pick we get in round 2. Maybe we should just stick here at 29 and go get our guy and just win until round 3, which might be a good possibility, but who really knows? But let's just say, for the sake of argument, to stay at 20, and who do I think the Hurricanes should definitely take here? And I've talked about him on this show. We've talked about Jack Murtaugh. We've talked about, Colin Potter, all these other guys. But, the guy I'm talking about is Jack Murtaugh's teammate, and I definitely think it should be Cole McKinney of the U.S. National Development Team. You've heard me talking about him before. If you haven't, make sure to go check that episode. I'll make sure to link it in the description if you want to check that episode out, where I talk about, looking at Cole McKinney. And for me, it's a no-brainer move here. Yeah, he's technically 32nd on the North American rankings. A lot of people see him go between 32 and 37. But if the Hurricanes feel like they might not get him within that range, why not to say you can go get him at 29? I don't really think people would call it a stretch to go get a guy like that, because there is a possibility that, getting him at 29 is a little bit early from where his projection is of 32 to 37. Getting him at 29 is still a perfect move, and I think you get your right-handed shot center that you really need of the future, and he already is showing the skill set of a guy that will fit the system perfectly. He's already considered a face-off specialist at 18, which is really huge, because if you look at the team like Carolina, who is a team that's well known for, winning face-offs, because you got Jordan Staal as one of the toughest guys to be on a face-off, plus you have Rod Brind'Amour, who won 2 Selkies, was almost a career 60% faceoff guy himself. Getting a guy like McKinney would be perfect, because he already wins a ton of faceoffs, and he's a guy that's considered a specialist. So that is really huge to get someone like that. Plus, he's also known as a PK specialist on the penalty kill. That's another great fit for the Carolina Hurricanes because, they are definitely a team that's well built on their penalty kill, especially with Tim Gleason running that. They're always, top 3, especially first when it comes to the PK every year. So if you add a guy like McKinney, give him a couple of years to develop and see where he goes from there, and you throw him into the lineup at some point, that's a great guy to have on the PK as well. So then, by the time Jordan Staal retires or however that is, McKinney could be ready to come up and take one of those slots. And he's a great two-way player who can score goals and make assists, and that's why I feel like he would be an additional great fit if you're looking at someone that the Hurricanes can draft, let him develop, because he's going to the University of Michigan next year, and we all know that Michigan and over the last few years are really good at developing players. When you look at Cole Sillinger, Adam Fantilli, all those guys. And like I said, you're talking about a kid who's 6 foot, 201. He's a right shot center, like I said, a great two-way, a PK specialist, a face-off specialist, and the fact that he's just really great at puck possessions and taking the puck off of players. And furthermore, like I've said, you're talking about a guy who had 26 points in 23 games in the USHL last year with the U.S. National Development Junior team. And then you look at his overall, U18 season, he had 61 points in 60 games with 27 goals, 34 assists, and the fact that he was also a plus 18. That's really impressive for a guy like him at 18 years old to put up those type of numbers. And if you look at the World Juniors last year for the U18s, how about 5 points in 7 games and had a +4 and only had 1 penalty in those 7 games? That's still really impressive when you look at that as well. So I'm going to say, if there's someone to get at 29 that maybe he doesn't make it to your first pick in round 2, and you feel like, hey, let's just keep it and let's go get our right shot center of the future that could potentially be a guy that could get there, I think Cole McKinney would be the perfect pick if you're the Carolina Hurricanes. He's got, he's a little bit on the bigger side, so you got the 6-foot guy, well built at 201, already at 18, so you can still get bigger as well. And like I said, he would fit the system perfectly. Great two-way center that the Hurricanes love having two-way guys that can do that. So he can play offense and he can play some defense. And like I said, he's a PK specialist. So you already know he's good on the shorthand, which is what the Hurricanes are known for. And then two, like I said, a face-off specialist. At 18, already being considered a face-off specialist, you would love to have that if you're Carolina. So that's why I feel like if the Hurricanes stay at 29, Cole McKinney would be the perfect pick. I know there's a lot of talks about Colin Potter going there, or maybe they look at Jack Murtaugh, or there's been some other random names that I've seen pop up in that spot. But for me, if you're looking for someone who fits the system perfectly, just from what he can do already, and has proven the points to do it in the play style, and like I said, you can't sniff at a plus 18. Like you can't scoff at a plus 18, especially in 60 games where you got 61 points. You would love to take that. And like I said, face-off, PK guy, the Hurricane, that screams a Carolina Hurricane to me. So if I had to pick someone if the Hurricanes do stay at 29, I would hope that it's Cole McKinney that's going to be there. So it'll be interesting to see what the Hurricanes do, but there's a possibility to trade it away. So that could be a whole case, and then this is a whole moot point, or maybe they stay at 29. So it'll be very interesting to see on night 1 what the Hurricanes do, and then what happens on day 2 on Saturday, where you go through rounds 2 through 7, but only time will tell. But at least we know the draft is finally here, and we'll see what happens. And then, of course, next week we got free agency. Until then, guys, this will be a Friday edition of Locked On Hurricanes. Thank you for making your first listen of the day. For your second listen, well, why don't you go check out the Locked On NHL podcast, where there is no offseason, and we bring you the daily league-wide stories that matter the most with the local coverage you love from Locked On. Find Locked On NHL on YouTube or wherever you listen to your podcast. If you want to keep up with me, I'm at OneShoeZach on X. The podcast is LO_Hurricanes. I'm also on Blue Sky at TheZachary Martin, where you can find my link trees in my bios, where you can check out all of my written content at thehockeywriters.com. If you want to check out my other podcast, well, it's the Searchcast on all podcast platforms and on YouTube. For Locked On Hurricanes, we're on Spotify, Google, Apple, iHeartRadio, wherever you listen to your podcasts. Make sure to leave a 5-star rating and review, because I might just read it on the show. For YouTube, well, it's Locked On Hurricanes, where you can subscribe, hit the bell notifications so you don't miss a show, hit the thumbs up to let me know if you like the show as well, share with other Kings to become everydayers just like you. But hope everyone enjoyed the Friday edition of Locked On Hurricanes. Enjoy your weekend, and until next time, as always, let's go Canes.